It's time for the Volquest Podcast, where we dissect the biggest news items of the week. Good Tuesday, everybody, and welcome into the Volquest Podcast here at Volquest.com on the family of On 3. If you haven't already, incredible deal. It won't last forever. It is $1 for 1 year. Go ahead and take advantage there. And, of course, follow all of our work on YouTube as well by searching Volquest. I'm Eric Cain with Austin Price, Rob Lewis, and Brent Hubbs. 63-6, the final score, Tennessee over Akron. First 3-0 start since 2016 when Tennessee started 5-0. Also in that season, Tennessee beat Florida. Could history repeat itself here in 2022? The Florida Gators are coming to town. A big week here on Rocky Top. Brent Hubbs as Tennessee looks to keep the momentum going to begin SEC play.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think everybody's attention was to Florida very quickly as soon as the Akron game was over. And for a lot of people, it was before the Akron game was over. Tennessee knew that they were the heavy favorite. They were in, that it was going to be a monumental upset if Tennessee didn't take care of business against Akron. They were clearly not competitive. And Tennessee did a lot of things right. The only thing didn't go Tennessee's way was the injury front. And that will be a storyline for the rest of this week. It's a storyline today, and it'll continue to be a storyline for the rest of the week, Austin.
Yeah, 100%, Hubbard. And they're going to try to rehab those guys best they can. We'll see who's available on Saturday. You said it best in the 2-minute drill. If the game was today, as far as Cedric Tillman's concerned, probably not playing. But the game's not today. So we'll see if they can rehab and get him any closer to playing by Saturday. Sometimes it happens, sometimes not.
I think it's big, too, that, if, again, Cedric Tillman, Jabari Small, Dylan Sampson, all those guys kind of dinged up in that football game. Rob, did you see anything else from the wide receivers that would give you confidence to help you're not going to replace Cedric Tillman if worst case scenario, but Mel Keaton, a long touchdown reception. Walker Merrill has looked good through 3 games in mop-up duty. Squirrel White got in the football game. Anything from the wide receivers that you liked?
Well, I mean, I think you had to like Jalen Hyatt a lot. I mean, he's been, and I'm not saying he's taking Tillman's place when they play different positions, but I can promise you that he probably put some stuff on tape that Florida's safeties and nickel backs are going to be aware of this week. And the Squirrel, I mean, again, small sample size, but, I think just off what he's shown you off the one play the other night, if he's in the game, then you've got to respect that speed on the perimeter. But, with what Tillman has done over the past, 16 games, I mean, you're not going to replace that. I mean, even if he's not full speed, I think if he can get out there and play, then he impacts what Florida is going to do defensively.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. I mean, you have to have a game plan for him. And Hendon Hooker said on Monday that he's got full trust in all of his wide receivers, but he's got trust in one guy more than he has in everybody else, and that's Cedric Tillman. It's the reason why he was targeted 18 times in the Pittsburgh game. That's the security blanket. And so while those other guys have done some things, they haven't performed consistently and done what Cedric Tillman has done. And so what's Josh Heupel's counter to that if Cedric Tillman can't go? We'll see. Is it move Brew McCoy to that side of the field where he and Hyatt would be lined up on the same side of the field, which we haven't seen this year, and flip Mel Keaton over to the other outside spot? I don't know. We'll see. I think you got all week to prepare for that because Cedric Tillman's not going to practice football this week. We'll just see where he's at the end of the week.
Think of the run game as well. Jabari Small lost, and he had that shoulder issue all season last season. And when he went down on the second carry of the game and kind of immediately went up there and looked at that shoulder, might be a stinger situation. But he was seen on the sideline when I went back and watched the telecast the day after, kind of rotating that shoulder on the bike and kind of getting that in. He looked more like, with his pad still on, that he could have probably come back and played in that football game, but there was no point, obviously. But running back depth's an issue because Small went down, Sampson went down that football game. You had Jalen Wright, who had 23 carries and was running the football in the third quarter, which was not a good idea, in my opinion. It looks like Small potentially is in a little bit better of a spot than Tillman, but still, as the week goes on, we'll have to see.
Yeah, and Tennessee's got to run the ball, Austin. I mean, that's the bottom line. When you look at Florida defensively, the biggest struggle for them to this point has been their inability to stop the run. Utah's had over 200 yards. South Florida had nearly 300 yards rushing. Kentucky didn't run it well, but they haven't run it well against anybody to this point. Florida's biggest struggle on defense is stopping the run. I still think the Tennessee run game is unknown. Maybe I'm crazy, but I don't think Tennessee's really proven anything in the run game. I don't take what Ball State, who was dropping 8 into coverage, does, and I don't think Akron was very good against the run, and Tennessee really didn't even try to run it against Pittsburgh other than some quarterback runs.
Yeah, I think what you're going to see Saturday is all hands on deck when in terms of, Hendon Hooker is going to have to be a factor in the run game. And so, even if they got a full complement Saturday, I think you're going to see that. If they're a little bit, shy of that, then, it will be interesting to see how they kind of disperse the carries. I mean, if let's play devil's advocate, let's say Jabari Small and Dylan Sampson can't go. I mean, then you're with Justin Williams-Thomas, who, and Jalen Wright, 2 guys that have put the ball on the ground at various points of this football season as your top 2 backs. So, if I'm Jerry Mack, I'm over there with all kinds of different things, trying to, to nurse his group back to health. So this running back group, as Hub said, you don't know a whole lot about them. It certainly feels like this offensive line is a better pass blocking offensive line than a run blocking offensive line. But to that point, I don't think we'll know till we see Tennessee really make a strong, conscious effort to try to run the football consistently.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to see what that run game looks like. And again, a lot of it has to do on health, and we should know and hopefully find out more as the week goes on. I couldn't agree more. Hendon Hooker in the run game, I think it's going to have to be a big factor as you go on an SEC play. And Jerome Carvin spoke on it earlier this week a little bit that, even when they have designed runs for Hendon, got to do a good job of trying to keep him upright, trying to lessen the hits, because he said that Hendon is the key to our offense right now. Understand that, but still you want to be able to move the football and find some seams and go score. And I think you can find that in the quarterback run game. Look, at Pittsburgh, that's what they tried to go and win the football game doing in that overtime period. Flip the script defensively. Anthony Richardson for Florida kind of looking ahead. Has not had obviously a good start to the season without a doubt. I think Tennessee's pass rush has been pretty solid through 3 games. Something that Josh Heupel spoke on earlier in the week as well, keeping the pass rushing lanes, the integrity there. Rob, that's something that Tennessee's going to have to do this week. I don't care if Anthony Richardson's dinged up or not. Going to have to stay true to the pass rush lanes because he can gash you if not.
Yeah, and I thought, talked about it last week. I think Kentucky gave you the blueprint because the guy's completing 53% of his passes. He's thrown 0 touchdowns. He's thrown 4 interceptions. You want this guy in the pocket. I mean, that is to your advantage. I mean, where he has the advantage if he busts loose in a broken field situation, just like you're talking about, Eric, where somebody loses contain, gets out of position when in their upfield lane. But he has been shaky when it's just been on him to throw the football, to make good decisions, and to put it into tight windows. And if I'm Tennessee, Tim Banks has been really aggressive. I almost don't know, Hubbard, if you don't dial that back a little bit and show Anthony Richardson a lot of zone, a lot of guys, dropping back in coverage and really put the burden on him to show you that he can dissect things and keep the ball out of harm's way.
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to mix it up more in this game than you have the last 2 games. I mean, it was pretty clear that their mission, particularly in the Pitt game, was to totally come after the quarterback in a variety of different ways. I think you've got to mix it and try to bait Anthony Richardson into some stuff. And I think you got to contain him on the corner. I know he's been banged up. I mean, you look at it, he rushed for 106 yards against Utah and 3 rushing touchdowns. Since that game, he's only got 28 yards on 13 carries. So, and some of those are sacks. I mean, they weren't designed runs. So he's been very cautious and very hesitant about running. I just don't think you want to let him get going and get a good run early and get comfortable and get settled in to kind of get his game going. So I think if you're Tennessee, you really got to protect the outside lane, the containment there, play your rush lanes, still come get him some. But I'm with you, Rob. I think you mix this one up a little bit more as opposed to dial it up with aggressiveness every snap, the way it felt like they did at Pittsburgh.
Faults on Tennessee's defense 3 games in, and I understand 2 MAC opponents. What are you really going to learn from that? But, Tennessee was also obviously very impressive as we spoke on in the Pittsburgh game, getting after the quarterback. Kept Tennessee in the game, won Tennessee the game essentially in Pittsburgh. You look at the secondary, I think there's still some issues and some struggles we've talked about in, last year dating back to then, but I think the front seven overall has done a good job of getting after the quarterback. Linebacker plays look pretty decent so far. I thought it was good also to see Jeremy Banks flash a little bit because we hadn't seen that, over the course of the first two games. Good to see Elijah Herring, obviously. How much do they trust him to play some? But getting Juwan Mitchell back in the fold, getting him a lot of snaps with both Banks and Beasley, I thought that was a good sign. Maybe a takeaway from the Akron game moving on into Florida.
Yeah, 100%. I think the more you can get this defense more depth, the better they're going to be. I mean, I tongue-in-cheek joked with Jalen McCullough after the game, like you're used to playing 75 and 80 snaps a year ago in blowouts. You didn't play near that much, Saturday night because Tennessee was rotating so many guys in the secondary. I think that goes across the board. Tennessee's deeper at linebacker than they were a year ago. I still think they're filling things out on the defensive line. But it's hard not to like where the defense is at through 3 games just from a depth standpoint. They still have some holes to figure out. They got to figure out what they want to be at corner. I think they got to figure out how many snaps they want to play some of those defensive linemen. But on the whole, this just feels like a more complete unit than it was a year ago, and feels like, if they need to get a stop, they could potentially get one. Last year, at the end of the year, it didn't feel like they could get a stop even if they really wanted to.
And Austin, something you spoke on in the post game mini pod, getting those snap counts for Amari Thomas down a little bit. He's out there. He played 65 snap against Pittsburgh, not as many obviously against Akron, but even in pass rushing situations, getting after the quarterback, maybe replacing him with somebody else to get more speed on the film will help him and help Tennessee in the same sense.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think the more you can get, players like Bryson Eason, Tyree West, DJ Terry on the field, the better. Just to kind of, spell, the guys that you're leaning so heavily on. I mean, you can't tell me, Hubbard, that Big O's not going to be more fresh in the fourth quarter if you can steal a few snaps here and there in the second and third quarter. And, and then I hope bring along the depth for a guy like Eason, who's still trying to find his way after being a linebacker in high school, then going defensive end, now defensive tackle. I mean, it's hard not to think that he's still not trying to figure things out. Same thing with Tyree West. I mean, a year ago, he's playing high school ball in South Georgia. That's not the same as playing in the SEC.
No, there's no doubt. I mean, West had a difficult time lining up a couple of times. He looked a little sporadic out there for a couple of plays, but then he made a couple of plays in space and did a couple of things that they don't have a lot of guys who can do that. The one thing I'll give Rodney Garner credit for, Rob, when you look at the snap numbers, maybe it was out of necessity at Pittsburgh because he had to. They played Omari Thomas more snaps than they wanted, but he did play Bryson Eason, and he did play some of those other guys. He played more depth than anybody else did on defense, which you have to up front. Where's that commitment level with Joshua Joseph? Where's that commitment level with Tyree West this week in SEC play against the Florida Gators?
Yeah, I'm going to be interested to see because those two kids both flashed, but they also, they flashed against Akron. And, how much trust did they gain from that one, that one outing? I can see them playing in some situational spots, but if either one of those kids is a double-digit snaps on Saturday, I'll be a little surprised. But I couldn't agree more. I mean, I don't think you can play Big O consistently. What was it, 62 snaps at Pitt, 64?
Yeah, it's like 65. Yeah,
I mean, that's a heavy burden for a guy playing that position at his size, and I think Rodney, wants to play a lot of guys, but I think once the bullets start flying, it may be hard to, grab that one guy you're not so sure about by the shoulder pads and sling it onto the field.
Brent, something you and I were speaking on Sunday afternoon during our rewatches. 4 freshmen on defense that really, really stood out, jumped off the tape. But how much trust will you have in those guys in a game like this? Tyree West was one, Joshua Joseph, James Pierce, and Elijah Herring. Those guys did a lot of things against Akron. I think it's safe to say Elijah Herring's going to be used in certain situations because we've already seen it at points in times this year, even early on in the game against Pittsburgh. James Pierce, I wouldn't go on a ledge and say that you're going to see him in critical downs right now, but he looked good against Akron. And then Joshua Joseph's a lot of snaps against Ball State, not a whole lot of snaps against Pittsburgh when Roman Harrison started to get back in there. But those 4 freshmen on Saturday, I thought did a really nice job.
Yeah, clearly Joseph is the guy that they have the most trust in right now when you look at the snaps that he got. I think you're going to see Joshua Josephs on Saturday. I think you'll see him pretty early on Saturday in a rotation. Does that mean he's going to play 20, 25 snaps or 30 snaps in a game? I don't know that, but I think they'll get his feet wet early in that game, particularly in some of their pass rushing stuff that they do. They're not going to line him up and ask him to play the run all the time. But here's the thing. You see the play that Joshua Josephs made on the speed ops or on the jet sweep. You're talking about playing contain. That's what you want an end to do, right? He can affect the tackle, but he's got enough length and speed and change of direction where he can also play contain out there. They don't have many guys who can do that. And so I think you're going to see Joshua Josephs early. I don't think you're going to see James Pierce, early in this game. I don't know that he's going to be a factor unless the game's under control or out of hand, whatever you want to look at it there. But I think when you talk about those defensive guys, Joseph, sneak a snap or two along the way with Tyree West, as Austin has mentioned, just to spell. Maybe it's a half dozen over 4 quarters, but just a little bit to help. And we'll see if they come back with Elijah Herring in some pass rush situations and some specialty packages. They certainly worked a lot of Jawan Mitchell to get him on the field and try to get him as much experience. With him back, with Beasley and with Banks, it looks like Herring's battling to be the 4th linebacker right now. So I don't know that you'll see a ton of Elijah Herring other than special teams.
Well, I agree with Hubbs wholeheartedly. Now, do they maybe steal a snap or two with Elijah Herring at some point? Maybe. I could see that. They did that at Pittsburgh, even though Juju wasn't available. I mean, they had he and Solon Page down there along the goal line at one point, somewhat early in that football game, as Eric pointed out. The one thing that's apparent to me is Elijah Herring will be a starting linebacker on this team a year from now. Jeremy Banks ain't going to be here. He'll be off to play professionally. Juju is ending his eligibility. And to me, Elijah Herring is going to be moving into one of those 2 spots sooner rather than later.
Oh, there's no doubt. I mean, they love this guy. And hey, that's one that's when they took him, some people are like, well, he's not this or maybe he's not that. I mean, the guy's a football player, plays with the right level of intensity. He's gotten better since he's been here. He will be a guy who's going to be a fixture on this defense a year from now. How much he plays in the conference schedule the next few weeks, we'll see. But you're going to continue to see him develop and get better through special teams. They'll play him some here and there as the season goes along, but he's going to be a fixture in Tim Banks' defense for sure.
It's kind of funny, again, like at the time of his commit, the outside noise was, oh, they're just taking him to get to his brother in the next class. And, hey, he's turned into a really, really good player that they like you pointed out. Moving forward and looking at this Florida game, Rob, I mean, any way you spin it, I mean, Tennessee's lost 16 in the last 17. We all know that. Tennessee's not won since 2016. Josh Heupel was asked about the mental hurdle that needs to be passed or the psychological factor in this. Is there one there? Josh Heupel kind of downplayed it and everything. And I understand it saying that, nothing in the past dictates the future, it dictates now and all that. But what's your opinion on that? I mean, this group of guys in this locker room's never beaten Florida. Is there something there to that?
I don't think there is. I mean, I think there is amongst Tennessee's fan base, but I don't think that matters on Saturday. I mean, I just think Heupel's change things around so much. It just doesn't even feel like you're walking into the same place when we go into the building over there. I mean, it does it for me. I mean, everything about the program feels different from the top down. I don't think there's a Florida, some kind of big mental hurdle that these guys have to get past. I just, it's a completely new Florida coaching staff. Florida's not been a juggernaut for several years. I mean, yeah, they've had Tennessee's number, but I don't see it.
Rob, do you think how much of an advantage or how much of a help? We talked about this a little bit on the 2-minute drill. I think it's a big deal, but I may be overblowing it. How much do you think it's a significant deal that Josh Heupel's a former Power 5 quarterback who's played in rivalry games, who's been a part of rivalry games under the scrutiny that rivalry games are now? That's no offense to Philip Fulmer, who was an offensive lineman who played Alabama. How much do you think it helps Josh Heupel from a don't get too keyed up, just go about your business every day and get yourself ready to play and go really kind of soak in the moment a little bit? Because I kind of felt like that was the quarterback he was at Oklahoma in their rivalry games. How much do you think that helps with him getting his team ready to play.
I think that informs everything he does as a head coach. I mean, I think that's why you don't see him get so bent out of shape, and he's not, don't talk about game day, don't talk about what a big game it is. He's like, of course it's a big game. Our kids should enjoy that. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I think having played on the stage that he played for, Texas, Oklahoma, back, Oklahoma, Nebraska was still a thing, playing in huge bowl games. I think all that stuff is part of his mental makeup as a head coach. But I think he brings a player's mentality to it. I mean, no, he's not played in 20 years, but I still think that's he comes at being a head coach from the perspective of being a really good college football player. And I think he probably as he's putting together his philosophy, I mean, had things that he felt like worked, had things that he felt like didn't work. And yeah, I mean, I think it's a big deal. I really do.
At the time of this recording, really haven't had a chance to dig down deep into the stats like I will obviously later in the day. But just looking at Florida, Austin, there's still a ton of talent on that roster. I mean, we've been saying that the entire offseason. Look at the defense in particular, a lot of talent there. Depth might be an issue, but you got Trey Dean returning. You got Torrance, you got Brennan Cox. But one guy that might not be there for Florida, wasn't there against South Florida, is their 6-year linebacker, Ventrell Miller. Got a little banged up lower body injury against Kentucky. The talk is right now that he probably won't be going for Florida in this one against Tennessee. Tennessee will obviously need to take advantage, but a Florida defense that's not looked great, but still a lot of veteran players that have played a whole lot of football and know how to play football.
Yeah, they have talent. To say they don't would be silly, but this is a different looking Florida roster than we've seen in my lifetime. It's a different looking front seven on defense from a Florida roster standpoint than I've seen in my lifetime. Still good, but even when Florida had some suspect offenses the last decade, Hubbard, you could always count on the front seven to be just ruthless. And it's not ruthless. I mean, again, I'm not saying they're bad because they're not bad, but they're not what they were. And so, talent, yes. A lot of talent, no. They'll have to play really well Saturday to hold Tennessee down offensively, in my opinion.
Yeah, what's interesting is their strength defensively is their secondary. Tennessee's strength offensively is throwing the football. That's what they like to do. We don't really know how good Tennessee's run game is. I think it's still a little bit of a prove me type deal. Florida has struggled to stop the run, which is uncharacteristic for them. So can Tennessee take advantage of that and run the football effectively? Because as we know, and Rob, we've talked about this ad nauseum, Tennessee's different when they can run the football effectively. And if they can get downhill to start running the football against Florida, man, it opens up a world of possibilities for them offensively.
Yeah, I mean, that's when the tempo matters. That's when when you're snapping your seventh play in 2.5 minutes, and picked up 3 first downs. That's when it really starts to wear on you. I mean, subs. It's hard to get subs in for the defense, if not impossible. Get a little confused. So yeah, I mean, running the ball is a big deal, and you can't really overstate it. I mean, I don't know if there's a number, but I mean, Tennessee can't average 2.3 yards a carry or whatever it was at Pittsburgh, in my opinion.
No, you can't. You can't. And again, that's why the health of the running back room, moving forward through this week is going to be a big indicator. But I think we're going to know kind of what Tennessee is running the football after this game, because again, it's not been truly tested or given an effort against Pittsburgh. So I'm intrigued to see what that looks like. Credit Tennessee fans, Austin. The sellout crowd for Akron, that place at kickoff looked awesome for Akron. Josh Heupel was thrilled. Said he's never experienced a Vol walk like that before. Said it's college football at its best. On Monday, he said that there won't be a better atmosphere in college football than what's going to be here at Neyland Stadium on Saturday night for Tennessee and Florida. It kind of just goes back to what we've been saying. The stage is there, College Game Day, Checker Neyland, CBS 330. How does Tennessee kind of take advantage of this? And I'm not saying obviously win the football game, but is there any fear that the moment might be too big for some of those guys in the locker room?
No, I don't think so. I think this is where, Josh Heupel and Alex Golish's ability to draw up plays, scheme things up to get guys open, much like they kind of did a year ago at times, early can, you get the right play call early in this football game, get Florida, caught napping, this place will come unglued. I think that I said this Sunday night, I'm going to beat it. That horse is going to be nothing but bones by the end of the week. That first quarter is huge for Tennessee. They cannot turn it over. They can't give Florida short fields. They can't put their defense backed up on a short field with, having to keep Florida from driving 30 or 40 yards. They've got to take advantage of that opening stanza. If they do that, then I think there's a real chance Tennessee does big things Saturday. If they don't, and they let Florida get a little bit of momentum, things can drastically change.
Yep, and Tennessee needs Hendon Hooker to get going the way Hendon Hooker was going a year ago, because as you mentioned, the Georgia game, they get one early. The Kentucky game, obviously, they got 3 and 3 snaps or whatever it was. Hendon Hooker's been a little too amped up, to his own admission, I think, a little bit too amped up to play to start games. 3 of 7 against Akron, and then he goes 11 for 11 to finish. 2 of 8 against Pittsburgh, 4 of 8 against Ball State, only completing 39% to start games the first 3 games of the season. That's not a panic button, but in this game, with that crowd, as you're mentioning, Austin, I think it's imperative, Rob, that Tennessee keeps that crowd engaged and keeps them going by doing something early. And to me, that puts the burden on Hendon Hooker to start a football game better than we've seen him start it from an accuracy standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to make it work against Florida and for you. I mean, you can't, as Eric was just asking about, you can't let the moment be too big. And I don't think it's a negative for Hooker. I mean, I think he's just jazzed up to start the game, and I think he's done a really good job of, dialing himself back in, probably with some help from Joey Halsey about, some details here and there. But golly, Hubbard, what year was it where they hit LaMarcus Coker on the little trick play early? Was that 04?
No, it was 06.
06. Blew the lid off the place. I mean, if they can get something like that going early, I mean, I think Neyland's going to be off the chain anyway. But if they can go up, 10-0, 14-0, 17-7, I mean, I think that place will be just a madhouse.
And Brent, that's something Casey Clausen mentioned on the Rocky Top Rewind Sunday night, saying, hey, we want to throw the first punch. Go out there and throw a double pass, whatever, trick play. I mean, what do you have to lose? You've lost 16-17. I don't know if they'll do anything like that, but I would be fine if Tennessee's offense went and took a shot early and tried to blow the lid off that place like Rob mentioned. Yeah,
I don't think there's any doubt. I mean, and here's the thing too. If you don't have a Tillman, or if Tillman's not 100%, what have you found this week that you can go attack Florida with? I mean, you go back and look at that Kentucky game. I mean, Tennessee ended up hanging on to win, Austin, but that was a game. All those Kentucky people were jazzed up, ready to go. They were ready. They were as electric as you'll see that place. Okay, and it's not the most electric place in the world, but they were ready to take Tennessee down, and Tennessee silenced it. You want to do the opposite in this game. Jump on Florida early and put the pressure on Anthony Richardson and that team to answer by making a big play early. I think it's important that Tennessee gets out of the gate. I don't think they're going to run it 12 plays for 80 yards. I think if they score quick out of the gate, it's going to be on a big play somehow, somewhere.
Yeah, I agree. I think the trick plays and all that stuff are really neat. And I don't disagree that, in the right time and place that you pull stuff out like that. But, I think if it don't work, then everybody's going to go, well, I mean, why are we just not running our regular offense? Why are we trying to get out of what we're doing? Like, that's what you do when you're desperate, running trick plays, blah, blah, blah.
I'm not saying they have to do a trick play. I'm just saying be aggressive. I think Heupel's wired that way.
Right, but I'm with Rob. I mean, and no offense to Casey never run a trick play to open a game, all right? Like, his first start against Alabama, they threw a deep ball, okay? And they did go attacking through the first punch in his first start there. To your point, Austin, is don't pull a Ball State, right? Don't do something goofy out of the gate that causes a problem. You be you, because what you are is you're a big play offense by nature, okay? Look at how many big plays you had last week. I mean, if you describe Josh Heupel's offense, what is it? It's a quick strike, big play offense. Go be aggressive and be you. Don't come out with this mentality of we have to establish ourselves on the ground, which nobody expects him to do because that's not his nature.
No, I mean, I'm big on just, you go out there and you swing a haymaker and you just keep swinging that haymaker. I mean, like, just as you said, just be aggressive. Because I'm not saying like let's say Tennessee goes and scores, then they get a turnover. I'm not saying that you don't try to, go for the jugular on the next play, because I think that's exactly what Heupel would try to do, especially if you had a short field. Try to steal the you already got the momentum, but really just like capsize that thing like a tsunami.
Or AP, if you're 4th and 1 on the goal line and you got 100,000 people ready to lose their minds, don't kick the field goal.
Agreed. Don't kick the field goal. Play aggressive.
So what you're saying, AP, is go out there and throw some Jimmy Callaways.
You got it. Exactly what I'm saying.
Sunday afternoon, the Week 4 AP College Football poll was released. The top 7 unchanged: Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, Clemson, Oklahoma, USC. Kentucky moves up 1 spot to 8. Oklahoma State drops a spot to 9. Arkansas stays steady at number 10. And then looky there, Tennessee is at number 11. I mean, that's fine. I guess my biggest takeaway is these rankings don't mean anything until you get into conference play. I mean, Florida jumped all the way from unranked to 12th after the Utah win. Speaking of Florida, they slipped back to number 20 this week, so it's going to be an 11-20 showdown. But Brent, anything big to Tennessee being ranked number 11th? I mean, nice little accomplishment, but it truly doesn't matter right now, does it?
It means game day is coming to town. I mean, it means you got the eyes of the college football world on you because you're one of the marquee matchups in a rivalry game where both teams are ranked. And so that's what it yields you. It yields you a national platform to show your atmosphere off to. I'm with you. I mean, rankings are whatever rankings are right now. Who knows? I mean, is Arkansas the 10th best team in the country? I mean, they struggled with Missouri State last week. What does that mean? We've talked about it. I mean, you need more sample size to know exactly what you have and who you are. There's a lot of hot take overreactions and rankings, but what it does for Tennessee is it puts you in a national spotlight of relevancy, which is what Tennessee fans have been craving for 2 decades now.
This might be a bigger conversation, Rob, but on that note, look at the rankings. I mean, is the East catching up with the West right now? I mean, Georgia's obviously out in front. Kentucky's at 8. Say what you want if that's overreaction. Tennessee's at 11. You've got Florida at 20. Is the East catching the West?
Well, I think for sure
they
are. I mean, Alabama, to me, they're still Alabama. I know they had the hiccup at Texas, but the reason it's catching up is, I don't think Texas A&M is not making the leap that a lot of people anticipated, the number of years Jimbo's been there yet now, and LSU is not the LSU that they were 4 or 5 years ago. But that was those 2 programs have all the resources in the world to compete with anybody, and they're down right now. And you've got Tennessee, Kentucky on the come up, and I don't think Arkansas is on that level. Isn't Arkansas like a 10-point dog against A&M this week?
I'm not sure. I'd have to look that up. I think they are.
It's 9 or 10. It's, I think, a pretty stark comment about what Vegas thinks about Arkansas.
My 2 biggest takeaways around the SEC this weekend: Austin Price, Georgia's good. Shane Beamer, bad look, and Auburn, a decent first half. I watched every snap of that first half. They moved the football. They just couldn't punch it in, but the wheels fell off in the second half. Auburn is a bad football team.
Well, when you're bad at quarterback, and we've seen that around here, when you're bad there at quarterback, it's hard to be good overall unless you have a great offensive line, a great tailback, and a great defense. And so, I'm not surprised Auburn is what they are. I mean, they've got a really good tailback, but, their offensive line is okay, not great. And they have terrible quarterback play. And, Shane Beamer has got to quit allowing others to affect him, because he gets so affected by the outside noise, then he gets himself in these terrible positions. And that we've seen that happen to several coaches throughout time.
Well, the reality is South Carolina was a summer hot take that, everybody was banking on Spencer Rattler being great. And he has not just he's not put a resume out there to suggest that was going to be the case. Gunslinger, aggressive guy, Rob, going to take some chances with the football, going to get himself in trouble. Just hasn't done enough to yield the creation of hype. And part of that was South Carolina creating it for themselves. But he's not the savior that I think everybody thought he was going to be over there. Not saying he's a bad player, doesn't have all the parts to go around with him. And the guy basically lost his job at Oklahoma. So it's not like he was the anointed one that some people wanted him to be made out to be.
Yeah, I never really saw the South Carolina love unless you thought Spencer Rattler was a legit Heisman Trophy contender. And, I think we can all agree he is not that.
Now, LSU's interesting to me, too. What did they find in the fourth quarter? Was that just an utter meltdown by Mississippi State, or did LSU figure something out offensively in the fourth quarter to kind of get them moving in the right direction? Because that's Tennessee, that's a future opponent for Tennessee. I think it's a little bit interesting to keep an eye on them as to what they found, because I don't think they're void of talent in any way. Did they find their footing a little bit offensively to get moving in the right direction? I think that's an interesting thing.
Another team that's mediocre at quarterback. Got plenty of talent around him, but he's not the best decision maker. And at Mississippi State, they're going to have highs under him and lows, just like any place he's been.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But just curious as to see kind of what LSU does. Does that jumpstart them a little bit at all? I think when you talk about the West, Eric, you were asking the question about the West. I think the biggest reason why it looks like the East is catching the West a little bit is quarterback play. Mm-hmm. I know Will Levis is getting a lot of hype, probably more hype than he deserves, but I can promise you there's some teams in the Western Division would take Will Levis, as their quarterback over there. There's a lot of teams would take Hendon Hooker as their quarterback over there. Texas A&M is starving for a quarterback to try to figure out what they're going to do there. KJ Jefferson, solid player at Arkansas, erratic as a passer a little bit, but he's one of the better quarterbacks in the Western Division besides Bryce Young, right? So I think when you look at what's the difference in the East and the West this year, better quarterback play in the East. When you talk about Hooker, you talk about Stetson Bennett, and you talk about Will Levis, those are three. I mean, Vanderbilt's getting better quarterback play right now than Texas A&M is. You're getting better quarterback play in the East than you are in the West.
Do we know what Ole Miss is? Last thing on our look around the SEC. Do we know what Ole Miss is? They ain't played anybody. They absolutely dominated Georgia Tech 42-0.
We know Georgia Tech's bad, and that's not going to end very well down there for Coach Collins. But no, to answer your question, I don't know what Ole Miss is.
Yeah.
Are they finding themselves a little bit? Maybe. I don't know. They struggled early at the quarterback position. Maybe they're getting a little better there. But Rob, there's been no test to this point for Ole Miss to have any idea what they are.
Yeah, I think the jury still very, very much out on them for sure.
Yeah, I mean, they, especially out of conference, have not been challenged at all.
Yeah, where the jury's not out on is on Georgia. There's no jury out on Georgia at this point. That's a really good football team. I mean, for everybody who thought all that they lost, that they would take some sort of small step back, they're not. They're still very good on defense, playing a lot of young football players on the defensive side of the ball, and a quarterback who should be getting his just due because he's a good football player.
Yep, no doubt about it. Tennessee and Florida this week. It's a big one. It's a big one. We'll have plenty of preview coverage throughout the week. Rocky Top Roundtable coming up, the matchup piece, 10 things I think. First glance, everything and more is available at the front page of the website, and of course on the Journal's Quarters. $1 for 1 year. If you haven't yet, take advantage. It's Florida week. What are you waiting on? Join Volquest on the On3 family. $1 for 1 year, and of course, always follow our work on YouTube as well by searching Volquest. For Rob Lewis, Austin Price, and Brent Hubbs, I am Eric Cain. Happy Tuesday, everybody, and enjoy Florida week. We'll be back again Thursday.
You've been listening to the Volquest Podcast every week here on Volquest.